Gonna let YouTube catch up. Gonna let YouTube catch up. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to yet another Tuesday live stream. We'll let folks start showing up. But today's topic should be hopefully good. I hope you guys like it. No joke. I kind of originally had a different topic planned, and I scrapped it because I felt like it was not good enough, if that makes sense. And I just kind of had to like sit during my lunch for part of my day after some phone calls and just let it rattle around in the old noggin there, figure out what I was gonna do. So, couple things. We're like, how do I put this? We're almost done with the Ultimate Guide to Fluval. So the video on Pro Mode is this Saturday, which I have been really busy, so I still have to edit the thing. So that's going to be fun. My next 2 nights are probably going to be like literally just sitting here at my desk editing. And then a couple, like, I'll have an announcement next week, so the week of Christmas. It'll be good. So if you can make it, be here. But we'll just say I'm trying to do everything I can to unblock certain things and make something really cool happen. So with that being said, I'm hoping that next Tuesday I'll have stuff finalized and can announce it. What else is there before we get into the topic? Not much. Just that, we're getting to the cold time of the year, so lots of stuff like can't ship or what have you. I thought about looking into something as far as like potentially doing another run to drop fish off somewhere, but it's just getting too cold. It's getting too cold to like reliably ship anything, and USPS is just so bogged down that you have limited options for shipping stuff. So probably have to wait for spring for anything like that, or at least warmer weather, which should probably take a couple months. And I guess the last thing is, next week I actually get a little time off from work, which is to say I'll probably be catching up on all the maintenance I have to do on my filters and tanks in general. And I might not even get it all done. Like, I was supposed to do a bunch of stuff during the week of Thanksgiving when I had some time off. And I spent most of that time, no joke, other than doing some stuff around my house I had to get caught up on. I caught up on sleep. I very frequently run on like 4 and 5 hours of sleep. So yeah. To answer my good friend Ron's question, this is a Rocket City Trash Pandas hat, which is a minor league baseball team down in Alabama that fully embraced the fact that they put their vote out on the internet to name their team, and it was shortly after, I think, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and they embraced the meme that was naming it the Trash Pandas because their city is actually nicknamed Rocket City. They do some stuff with NASA out there. So I couldn't resist to like play into the marketing meme and like reward a team that embraces the internet and bought their hat because I love the logo. Try and make that a little clearer on camera there. It's a raccoon in a trash can that's a rocket. It's pretty great. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. They're really, their emails are hilarious. But yeah. Anywho, let's dive into topic for a little bit. So today I want to talk about what kind of filtration is best for your aquarium. And let me explain why I came to this, right? I use a lot of different filtration. You've got folks like Corey who hate canister filters, where like I have multiple FX6s in use and a few other different type of canisters. I have lots of hang-on backs. Both the Seachem Tidal and the Aqua Clear are present all over several of my tanks, but I also have like a Penguin or Marineland 350B. I have an old Magnum Hot, the like hang on the back canister filter, as we used to call them, which I think is like the best hang on filter known to man. You just can't find them anymore. I have a bunch of stuff. I have stuff that I've gotten rid of, that I've tried, that I've phased out. You have people who don't use filters. They use their plants to do filtration and water changes. You have sponges. You have sumps. You have little breeder boxes. There's tons and tons and tons of options. So the question becomes, what is best for you? And the way that I look at this is really simple. This isn't like some hardcore calculation of like, well, depending on the fish load, and fish load matters a little bit, right? If you have a super, super dense fish tank full of fish, you either A, need to have really good water change schedule, and that's a big part of how you determine filtration, is your water change schedule. Or B, you're dealing with a much more powerful or capable filter, right? And this talk doesn't necessarily have to talk about media itself, but media matters a little bit from here to there. But what I will say is, if you run a lot of tanks, you should probably do your best to avoid tons of powered filters, right? So your hang-on backs, your canisters, and the reason why I say this is, one, just the electricity costs alone. It's so much cheaper to just run air, whether that's central air or some of the bigger pumps that can do like eight taps or more on their own. They're just so much cheaper to run and buy in the grand scheme of things. You can buy one of those pumps and a sponge filter for every tank, and it'll cost you a third to half as much as it would to put an aqua clear on every tank. Now you could get filters used or whatever and do that, right? It would be helpful, but yeah, there's ways to do things smarter, right? You've got Lucas Brett's, great example from chat. Doesn't use any filtration at all. Some tanks he uses Powerheads just to move the water around, but uses plants and a well-seasoned tank. So a tank that has gone through and built an established bacteria colony can do a surprising amount of what you need in a tank, as long as you don't really, really heavily stock the tank. Now, you want some amount of airflow in your tank no matter what. Your fish need it, your bacteria needs it. Most of the bacteria that we cultivate to help do our filtration is aerobic. It needs air. Anaerobic bacteria, the stuff that you get in like deep sand beds and stuff like that, doesn't process ammonia the way that aerobic bacteria does. So you need some level of air. So often, like most people, the easiest solution is like, I can get both air and filtration with a sponge filter, or like a breeder box, something like that, right? A small air-powered filter. You could even use something like the Zis Bubble Bio, the internal moving bed. You can make DIY versions of that. I'm not a big fan of those personally, but if you like them, you like them, right? In theory, they have a higher biomass, but I'm going to teach you a super, super, super cool secret. On average, most fish tanks, small fish tanks, can handle 3 parts per million of ammonia per day, just with their static bacteria load. And that can include that turns into an equivalency. So like a small bag of media about this big, right, of just a standard cheapo ceramic ring, or a relatively like medium-sized sponge filter can handle the same amount or more, very simply. So when we look at all these different filtrations, you can look at like when I did the Series X versus the Zis on its own with a little like K1 type style plastic media. Until I went to extremely, extremely high concentrations of ammonia, there was no real difference in what they could process. they process roughly the same amount of ammonia until I went to extremely high concentrations, like 20 parts per million plus, just so it went off the charts, readable, right? But I knew based on what I was dosing into the water, what I was going to produce. And then and only then did I see certain media had a higher potential capacity and could deal with slightly more or significantly more in some cases. But our fish tanks never produce that much waste. If you're producing that much waste, you've got like Murphy, right? You got a big maboop puffer who's like pooping out Cheetos. You know, you're dealing with insane waste. And at that point, you're probably dealing with really, really, really powerful filtration systems like a sump, right? Or a series of canister filters or some other really complex solution to help deal with all that waste. But for most of us, we're talking about like 10 gallons and 20 gallons or 40 gallons. We're not talking about like crazy nonsensical tanks. We're not talking like a 360 or 480 gallon tank with a wet dog, you know, an aqua puppy, as I like to call him, a giant maboop puffer or something crazy like that. So what it comes down to, and this is my best advice for anyone about what is the right filtration for you and your aquarium. Number one, how much maintenance do you want to do? If you are willing to clean out your filter every 2 weeks, every month, every 6 months, that starts telling you what to do. If you want something that gives you a higher flow rate, or you want something that's more still, that tells you what type of filtration to look at. So if you want lots of flow, you probably need a powered filter. But if you don't want to service it that often, you probably want to put a sponge on the intake. So that all you have to do is take the sponge off, clean it real fast, put it back on, and then the back filtration you probably only have to touch once every 2 to 3 months. Maybe even less if you're really on top of cleaning out that initial sponge filter on the intake, right? Like, I have an example, the Centoniensis tank. It's a 40 breeder. It's got a bunch of plants. I do the external sponge about once every 3 weeks. And I can tell by the flow coming out of the filter when it's time to go give that thing a squeeze out just to get the particles out. I'm not doing some like crazy bleach clean or anything like that. I'm just squeezing out particles out of that thing into a bucket and hucking it into my garden out back, right? I have yet to service the actual hang-on back itself. I don't need to. Because I'm not pushing it too hard. There's only so many fish in there. And that sponge filter on the intake is picking up most of the junk. So there's not a ton of junk getting in clogging the sponges in the hang-on back or the media. And I can just take a peek over it, look at it, and know, like, it's okay. Now, if you really like cleaning filter media, you do you. I would say the least work is a sump, but it's the most work to set up. The easiest two solutions are sponge filters or a breeder box, if you just take a breeder box and fill it with just like filter floss, right? Or something really simple. And then either the Seachem Tidal or the Aqua Clear as a hang-on back. They are the two easiest powered filters to service. There's a few other that are relatively easy, but those are the easiest. They have a tray that's easy to grab, pull out, do everything you need to. You literally just rinse your media really quickly in some tank water and then squeeze out your sponge. You put it all back together. Bam, you're done. It's fast. That's the benefit of these kind of filters. They're quick to maintain and in general, relatively efficient. Now for me, like, one of my favorite things is canisters because for big tanks is the fact that I can let an FX6, as an example, probably my favorite canister, run for a year if I really want to, and I don't have to touch it. It'll just handle it. Now, is it advisable to do that? No, we want to clean these out far more often than that. But they can take that kind of abuse and just keep running. And if you have a well-planted aquarium, the plants are doing so much of the work that really all your filter is doing is picking up all the gunk and particulates to keep your water kind of clean, right? So you don't see a bunch of stuff floating around, make it look like your fish are swimming through a really silty river or something, right? That's really what they're doing the most of. Your plants and your substrate have so much bacteria in them that they're handling so much of that filtration naturally for you. The filters just kind of clean up all the extra particulates, all the gunk. And you still are going to get mulm that you have to vac up every once in a while. So, I wanted to approach this topic really simply. To me, the biggest important thing is the maintenance schedule I want to do. I know that I can let my FX6 go for a really long time. I can be extremely negligent. I can do the same thing with the sponge filter as long as it's relatively coarse. And the reason why is that sponges just kind of find a way to keep flowing water. Right? It's simple, it's easy. But you ever want to know how you filter, how you speed cycle a tank? Don't go buying a turbo start. Don't go buying pre-seeded filters or any of that garbage. Take your sponge filter from your current running tank. Go to your new tank. Squeeze it out. There is all the live bacteria you'll ever need. And a little bit of detritus to help feed it while the rest of the system catches up. The person, I saw this in a rainbow fish group where they refer to it as filter gravy. And I'm stealing that term from here on out. The fastest way to cycle an aquarium, take an old sponge filter, take it to a new tank, squeeze that bad boy a couple times. Let all that gunk get out in that tank. And it might sound disgusting, but bam, like that, you're good. And you've cleaned out your sponge filter. As long as you have dechlorinated water, you can literally just take your sponge filter over, plop it back on, you're done. You've cleaned the filter out for the old tank and seeded the tank and the new one. So let's say that you have a big tank, right? 125 gallons, 75 gallons, 180, 210, any of these bigger ones, right? Flow becomes kind of important in these bigger tanks, and you can do that with air too. You can just, more sponge filters can create that flow, right? But if you want a powered filter, you kind of can do some options, right? There's all sorts of ways to turbocharge a filter. You could put pothos in the back of it, and that'll suck up all the nitrates if you're doing bare bottom tile tanks, or you hot rod it by changing out those stupid cartridges that come with it, putting in a good solid sponge and some nice media, and maybe go get Brightwell Series S, which I think it's still on sale. If it's not, you missed out. It was dirt cheap to get their super dust-free ceramic media. I bought a ton of it. And I'm pretty sure I could have called the Brightwater folks and been like, hey, can you send me more? But instead I just gave them money because I like them. I think I said Brightwell at one point. Oops, Brightwater. Brightwater media, Brightwell substrate additives. Sometimes it slips the old brain. I work too much. But in this case, this is where I would almost say, if you're going to look at multiple canister filters ever, like a big tank, and you're thinking, I'm going to put 2 FX6s on this bad boy, this is where I would say, start looking into a sump. Because a sump is the ultimate canister filter, but the difference is if you set up a sump right, your maintenance is literally just pull out a pre-cut piece of basically filter media you buy in a big roll, right? Throw that out, put a new pre-cut one in. You almost never have to do clean the rest of the media, because if you use the right stuff, it just gathers all the particulates for you, and you do that once a month. And you're done. It takes literally a minute. Because you're just quick, unroll, chop, wop, bop, done. Done. When you get a sump set up correctly, Sumps are faster to clean than like anything else. Now, if you're doing some real complicated sump and not like a simple style sump that you'd use in a freshwater tank, sure, it might take a little more time to do all the maintenance for it. But sumps allow you a ton of flexibility. You can do crazy things in sumps. You can treat a freshwater sump like you would in saltwater and have like a refugium for extra plants. And all that does is help harvest more and more nitrates out of your water. If you don't want plants up in the tank itself or visible around the tank, you could have something like pothos growing out of it. Easy, right? This is one of the powerful things about sump filtration. And you've got those tanks that have like built-in sumps. So like the Fluval Flex is a great example where they have kind of like a miniature sump built into the back. The Nuvo tanks, which are designed for saltwater, but some people do in freshwater, they have that like built-in back wall that's a sump. There's other acrylics that are out there that have a built-in sump. They all work on the same premise, right? It's trying to use sump-style technology, and technology is a loose term, right? In order to filter your tank, simple, easy, with relatively quick maintenance. It's just a pump. A lot of times you can hide your equipment in there. Simple. But we're not going to put sumps on small tanks, right? Unless we're going to try to do some like central system where we have like 5 or 10 tanks all linked together, and then we risk disease in one tank now spreads to every tank, so it's a risky system. And there's lots of faults here. For most people, you're not going to look at that, right? That's like complicated fish room type stuff. The simple stuff, Jeff Chambers just said this in chat. I honestly think this is the best way. Filtration is basically how do we make water flow through a type of media, and what becomes, in the end, I'm adding on to what Jeff Chambers said, what becomes best for what we anticipate to do with our tank as far as maintenance is concerned, look and flow. Because some people don't want a chunky sponge filter in their tank. They think it looks ugly. They want those like hyper pretty out and inlets going down to a canister, trying to do the ADA thing. And if you want to spend $9 million on your filtration system and glass tubes and cleaning that nonsense out all the time, go for it. I'm going to put a hang on back on a tank, or I'm going to put a sponge in it and just nod, smile, and call it good. Because I don't want to do that much maintenance, right? That's me. But there are people out there who want that super pretty aquascape tank. They want their all their equipment to look nice, like stainless steel or glass or whatever. They want it pretty. And they're only dealing with one tank, so they have all the extra time to maintain that one tank. But guys who have like, Mike from the Fish Tank Barn, who's got tons and tons of tanks in his barn, probably not putting a canister filter on every single one because the maintenance on that would be nonsensical, right? Lots of air power. We're trying to make it simple and cost effective when we get to like that fish room level, right? You got like 4 tanks and each one's in a different room. You can have a hang on back in each one. It makes maintenance kind of quick, simple, but it's also tucked back, kind of looks nice, lets you be a little more negligent, pushes more flow, stuff like that, right? Now, one kind of question that I want to half address, and then we'll get into full Q&A here, because I think this is relevant. They had a question about, where'd it go? Oh my goodness, I lost it. I'm terrible. I'm so bad at this game. So Emmanuel asked about filtration for Panda Loaches, right? Panda Loaches and a lot of those loaches come from river systems. So they don't necessarily need a ton of filtration. They want flow, or more importantly, what they really want is high levels of oxygen. In the stream system, it's not the flow that matters for the fish. Fish that live in high flow can live in low flow. What they need is that heavy rate of oxygen that is produced by all that churning water, all that flow that happens in streams and rivers. It heavily oxygenates that water because that surface is constantly roiling and moving and doing all this stuff, right? It's constantly pushing more and more oxygen and gas down into the water. So when we filter those tanks, you could filter them with just sponge filters as long as you're pushing enough air into the water, which a sponge filter, if set up correctly, is going to push a lot of air into your water. You could do it with just a simple hang on back. I love, on a 40 breeder, I love a hang on the back to the side to create stream flow, right? So it goes left to right or right to left instead of front to back. I like doing that in tanks where I can. Now, it makes it a nightmare for putting lids on tanks, which I own rainbows, and they like to jump, so lids are kind of a necessity, or you just play the gamble game and expect a fish to jump every once in a while. Not so great, right? But there's lots of things you can do. It's not about, in many cases, it is not about the filtration for your fish. And this might be the final lesson. It is not about how much filtration, but it is about creating the right environment for the fish. So a fish that comes from a stream, something with lots of flow, you don't necessarily have to produce a ton of flow to make most of those fish happy. In some cases, yes, you do. What you really need is a high oxygen level in the water, because that is what those fish are accustomed to, and without it, they will struggle. Fish that come from really non-moving water, right? Like your bettas, your killifish, they need very gentle filtration, but they still want some filtration. So something like a sponge does perfectly well. You just put a lower amount of air, simple, easy peasy. Are you trying to do lots of tanks? Go simple, make it cheap on yourself. Don't put a hang-on back on every tank. That's going to make your electricity bill a nightmare. Get sponge filters, run it on air. You've only got 1 or 2 tanks. You want them easy to maintain, but have a good flow or good, powerful filtration so you can put a bunch of fish in a tank. Get something like an AquaClear or a Tidal, right? A nice hang-on back. It's easy to service. You service it like once every 3 weeks to a month. You're going to be fine. It's all about figuring out what is best for the environment you're creating. Filtration is often, we so overfilter a tank so often, and we worry that it's not enough, and we'll sit there and fear like, oh my gosh, did I do XYZ, or is this enough, or do I have too many fish? If you are like me, right, and you put a lot of plants in a tank, you don't need a lot of filtration. The plants are doing all the work for you. I could probably run some of my tanks completely dead, and the plants would do all the work for a while. And I would still need to do some water changes here and there, but my problem would become oxygenation and flow in those tanks where, like, I don't have air stones. I rely on that stream from a hang-on back or whatever. I would just have to get air in there. And even then, the plants are producing air, but it's a good idea to get a little bit of movement, because in the end, one of the things that movement helps us with is preventing a protein layer or a scum layer forming at the top of the water. Because with no movement, that will form, and that can prevent or cause problems or prevent oxygen from getting into the water, period. Even if the plants are doing things, it can prevent the plants from getting what they need to produce oxygen. So, with that being said, we're going to dive into questions. I hope that just gives you kind of like an easy idea. Like, realistically, in freshwater, this is probably the best. The growing plants is a cheat code for aquariums. Really, really good statement. But honestly, plants are just your best filtration. They're so good. They provide so many things to an aquarium that if you can keep, fantastic. Right? So let's answer some questions. I want to dive into chat again at Bentley Pasco. If you have questions, it makes it easier for me to see. If for some reason I don't get to your question, feel free to just send it again. Don't spam it too hard, guys. But if we get to the end of the night, you got an extra question, my email is bentley.pasco@gmail.com. It'll come into chat shortly. Feel free to email me. I will get back to you. I promise it might take a few days as I'm working my brains out right now, but I will get back to you and I will answer your question. So if it's a pressing emergency, you might want to ask somebody else. But if it's a question that can wait a couple days, shoot me an email. I'll get back to you. All right. Jediah, what is a good brand option for a sump overflow without drilling the tank? Interesting question. So lots of companies. The thing is, like, those overflows, the box overflows, all work on the same principle. So realistically, almost any one of them is good. Just make sure that the acrylic is not like super, super thin. Make sure it's at least like a 1/4 inch and you're fine. Almost all of them are built on the same kind of gravity principle. So it really doesn't matter about the brand. A lot of times brands end up just charging you more for their name when they build the same product that somebody else builds. Worry more about just like, is this going to produce the flow I need for a sump? And which is to say, does it have enough downflow to make sure that it matches with the pump you're using to return the water to the tank? That's really all you need to look into. I wouldn't worry too much about a brand for your overflow. Just find one, and you can find tons on like Bulk Reef Supply and stuff like that. Just find one that looks kind of the way you want it to look and has the rough flow rate you need as far as what it's going to gravity feed through pipes down into your sump. Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of people have success with those. I've had some in the past, and I've just sold them all because most of the sumps I want to use are going to be on drilled tanks anyway. But if you're trying to get away from them, it's not bad. There's also ways to make, Zelf mentioned this, but like Select Aquatics is a great example. There's a PVC-based overflow tube that you can use without having to drill a tank. It's not the prettiest solution, but it's really, really simple to put together, and it creates a continuous suction that can work without having to have a proper overflow. It just doesn't look as good as an overflow could look, so it's something to consider. If you want something simple that you could hide behind, say, plants or something and is adjustable, that's also a good option. Stephen P. Are hang-on backs bad for any particular plants other than certain floating plants? Not really. Very few plants require to sit in nice, still water, except for floating plants. So most plants actually come from systems that are moving or they're immersed, so they're coming out of the water anyway, and they're relatively tough because they're not completely submerged all the time. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just if certain plants do better in flow than others, and put the ones that do better in the flow. A great example would be like a lot of Rotalas can handle flow pretty well, where things like a Madagascar lace plant might not like as much flow directly on top of it. It might like it around it, but not right on top of it. And some of them do. It all depends. Aponogetans are crazy plants. Average Gamer, is an FX4 too strong for a 40-gallon? My old Eheim sounds like it's on its way out. So the thing with the FX filters, the 6 and the 4, they actually have relatively gentle output. They pump a reasonable number of gallons per hour, but their output's pretty gentle. It depends on the fish in your tank. I would say no, but if you have like grass guppies with massive, huge tails, then yes. Right? Like, I keep my Moscow guppies, and they swim at the surface in the flow of an FX6, and they do just fine. And it's not about the size of the tank, it's that they'll sit right in the flow, where it is pushing the most water, and they can swim against it, with it, however they want. They can swim just fine. Right? And you'll have places where there's no flow, and you'll have places where there is flow, so just make sure there's room for your fish to have an area where there's not the initial like powerful flow coming out of it, and they'll be okay. In general, though, on like a 40-gallon, I'm trying to think. Like I think an FX4 is fine. I mean, it's a little overkill, but then again, if you want to be negligent, overkill is great. It's like kind of the story of my life. Whoa. Oh my goodness. I have a few questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss something up here. All right. Mike, standby. What's up, man? I run an FX4 with a spray bar on one end of the 75, and it gives nice stream flow. Yeah, and there's other ways you can augment the output of like an FX4 or an FX5 or an FX6. If you get the old one, the FX5 that became the FX6 now, to give it like a spray bar, and that drastically reduces that output of flow because it spreads it across more outlets. That's a great way to actually reduce the flow, but still give it a nice style of stream flow, so that like you go left to right. Adina Watson, where to order telescope goldfish from? You're asking the non-goldfish guy where to buy goldfish. So some examples of people that I know that do goldfish that would be better people to ask. Mr. Brown's Goldies is a really, really good one. And like Jimmy did a fantastic tour of his place. The guy's just super cool. There's also tons and tons and tons of like big goldfish keepers on like Instagram and YouTube. Like, find your favorite goldfish person. Honestly, they're going to give you better answers than me. Like, I'm so far removed from like the goldfish game. Although Aquahuna used to do a lot of goldfish. So if they, I don't know if they're still carrying goldfish currently or specifically telescope goldfish, but you could look, because the owner of Aquahuna really got his start by doing mostly goldfish. So that would be a good place to look as far as a bigger place. But you have some smaller folks like Mr. Brown's Goldies and several other people kind of in that vein. They are probably better sources to find if you want like super high quality or just nice, healthy ones than like the rainbow fish guy, right? I have one goldfish that I bought that was this big just to run through tanks eating duckweed, and now he's huge and probably needs to go into something like a pond with some other goldfish somewhere, like koi or something. Which I have a friend who does goldfish, so I should probably call her up. She does them very, very nonchalantly, but I think Old Cycles needs a new home with a lot more room. JK Aquatics. Hey Bentley, great channel. Keep up the great content. Thanks, man. What do you think about Matin filters? Just installed a couple of them on my fry tanks. So I like the amount of surface area they provide to you, right? The only thing that I don't like about a Matin filter is that for certain fish, they will like go right up those tubes and get behind the Matin filter. But in general, I think it's just basically like a super sponge filter, right? It's a really large sponge filter, gives a ton of surface area. It's great for shrimp because it's got lots of grazing room. And if you can figure out how to like cover your outputs so that stuff doesn't go up there, but still doesn't get clogged up, then I think you're fine. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I've actually been considering Matin filters for a longer term project, but I think I'm going to do generic sponges just because they're faster to clean. Or I'll do corner Matins. I actually really like corner Matins because they take up a lot less room. Stephen P. What's up, man? Any tips on Pogo Helferi? LFS sold me on it, but it's also my first tissue culture plant. Okay. So Pogo Stamen Helferi needs, honestly, to be super successful, CO2 and really strong light. We're talking like potentially more than a Fluval 3.0 can put out, depending on the size of tank you're using. Now, if you're still in like a 20 gallon or something smaller, 20 long or shallower, 30 breeder, it's fine. Once you start getting to like taller tanks, your 24-inch tanks, you might have to have 2 of those in an area to produce enough light, just because that's a really light-hungry plant. The other thing is that they can be kind of finicky in excuse me, in harder water. They tend to like soft water a lot more, but as long as you have the standard Pogo Helferi and not the red version, they're relatively simple to settle in. They just really, really benefit from having CO2. And more so than like the obvious, like, oh, of course a plant does better with CO2. More like they're more likely to survive with CO2 and propagate as opposed to just like subsist for a while and eventually die out. Matthew Clayton, I had to break down my aquariums for a move. Will my plants die submerged in a bucket for a couple weeks? They are sick looking already. So that's really hard for plants because the big thing is they're typically not getting a couple of things. One, they're most likely not getting the water movement that helps them get a little bit of carbon. They're probably not getting enough light. And I don't know if you're putting filtration in there, but the big thing is light, typically. Because you could have them in a little part of a sump, but they have flowing water to keep a level of oxygen when they need it at night and levels of carbon when they need it during the day, and you have to have light on them. So if you can replicate that, they can survive. Plants can live a surprising amount of time, but they will take some amount of damage just because it's not an optimal scenario for them. So your really fragile plants are gonna hate it. Some of your tougher plants can survive, but even then it gets tough if there's not a little bit of water churn and light. Light is a big thing. They really need light to do well. What I would do to be more successful if you have to have things in buckets, get air stones in the buckets to give you some water movement. Get some kind of light over them, like literally just if you can get a long light over several buckets, that's enough, and just turn it down. It doesn't have to be like blasting on them. They just need a little bit of light, right? It's not super tall. All your stems, bundle them with weights and weight them down, or if you have planters, you could plant them so that they're still in the alignment they would be in a fish tank in bundles, and that will help everything get a little bit of light. Make sure you're giving a little bit of fertilizer every once in a while and getting that water churn, and they should make it through. If we can't do that, there's some serious risk to losing a bunch of plants. Hope that helps, Matthew. I've done stuff in buckets for a while when I was like completely reformatting a tank and working a ton at the same time. And basically I had to get the bucket. I had to take a light off of a tank, put it on the bucket, and do what I just told you, which is like I weighted the bottom of bundles of plants so they would sit like they were sitting in a local store's plant tank, and did wonders for me. Did wonders. Lynn, would 2 sponge filters be enough for a planted 75-gallon tank? Yeah. So an average sponge filter, like a medium or large sponge filter, or like the Aquarium Co-op style sponge filter, any of those style and size sponge filters, can typically handle up to a 40-gallon tank on their own, and sometimes more. The big thing is about getting the right amount of flow. So just make sure that you've got the air stones set up in there correctly. Use an actual air stone, like I love those Zis no clog air stones. I love those things to death. I need more of them because I can get a really fine bubble pattern out of them. And the finer that bubble pattern is, you don't have to go hyper fine, right? But getting that, instead of like big gluggy bubbles, getting a nice fine pattern keeps more controlled flow going through the pipes and moves water better through that filter than like the big gluggy bubbles of just an airline straight into that little like tip that's in the sponge. But yeah, 2 with a bunch of plants is fine. The only thing that you might run into is if you don't place them perfectly right, you might get areas of water that gets pretty static and doesn't move much and gets that film on it. And really all that is just, once a day, kind of mess with that water a little bit, or like keep your plants below surface level so that when that air hits the water, it can help ripple and break up the surface. But you should be fine with just 2. Not a problem. All right. Let me see here. I'm going to make sure I had a little jump. Thank you, Candy, for informing everybody that Dr. Black will be next. He's in chat earlier. I saw him. He's a good dude. My Aussie friend. Cheryl Sturrock, great thing here. Something that Master Breeder Dean does is DIY PVC overflows in black or painted black can be absolutely amazing. Again, they're a cheap solution. They don't require a ton of work, and they actually can be more reliable than those acrylic overflows. If you set them up correctly, the acrylic overflows work amazing, but can be a little costly. Eric, earlier you said not to use any bacteria in a bottle to jumpstart a cycle. Can you explain this further? So, it's more jesting that you don't need to go buy bottled bacteria. You can if you don't have, like, another filter lying around. But realistically, any tank that has a sponge filter, if you just squeeze the gunk out in it, and I know it sounds disgusting to put that in your brand new tank, but that is the best way to seed an aquarium known to man. People shipping you seeded filter media, or going to your local fish store, or media in a bottle, or what a bacteria in a bottle. Screw all that. You don't need any of it. Take an old sponge, give it a couple squeezes in your new tank, get that filter gravy going all up in there. Bam, you're done. Let it sit and let it work for like a week. And your filter's in that new tank. 1, they're going to clean up all that gunk. 2, they're going to be seeded and ready to rock. You can literally just plop fish in. You're fine. You've given them the waste load and the bacteria starter for a tank that had some number of fish already. Going to be okay. Why waste money when you don't have to? Or more importantly, it's just a better bacterial culture because it's already more accustomed to your water in the first place. Super easy. Super easy. Krager's fish, 220 gallon. Nice. 6-foot tank, 6 adult Frontosas. Uh-oh, big boys. 2 at 14 inches. Real big boys. 1 at 12 and 2 at 10. The tank is running 4 Sun 304 Bs. Me and Sun, we're not friends. And 2 C670 sponges. Overkill? Maybe a little, but Frontosas have a high bioload. Realistically, as long as it is doing what you need it to do, if it's working, don't change it, right? Where I would caution you in the future, if you were to do another setup where you're going for another like big group of Frontosas or some other big set of fish, just put a sump on that bad boy. Just sump it. Because there's lots of ways to like, take the noise away from a sump. Because everybody's worried about sumps being super noisy. That certain drain types, and there's certain tricks you can do to take almost all that noise away to where it's no louder than a canister filter. Or than 4 canister filters running and pushing water around, right? Easy peasy, and the big thing is it lets you hide all your equipment. You can hide your... If you're doing CO2 for your plants, you can hide your CO2 gear. If you're using heaters, you can hide your heaters. All of it can be hidden in a sump. That's one of the best parts about sumps. But as long as that thing is working good for you now, don't change it, man. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ancient rule of cars applies to aquariums. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Andrew Meller, hydroponic filter for aquarium. Sure. If you want to set up a hydroponic rig to filter your aquarium, you can. There's plenty of people who do aquaponics based stuff with their tanks and set up some form of like microgreen growery or using pothos or some other like more decorative plant as opposed to an edible plant that works just fine. Yeah, you can do that. It takes a little more work, right? And it has certain requirements, like you've got to have the roots and they have to be left alone and all that kind of stuff, or at least not heavily messed with. Yes, you can do it. But the average aquarist probably isn't going to. But if you want to, go for it, man. They're extremely effective. You see massive colonies of like carp or koi or tilapia, the edible fish, right? Being done in aquaponic and hydroponic style setups. Why not? Knight Rider, any favorite Powerhead to combine with filter floss, brand-wise? Who makes the best corner box filter? What's your favorite? Well, you put like 7 questions in one statement. What are you doing to me, man? Favorite Powerhead? Who cares? They all do the same thing. A high door is fine, but I think the Corallias that they make are kind of expensive. I think most of those like Powerheads are too expensive for their own good. But if you're trying to get like a Powerhead instead of a flow pump, Marine Lands are fine. Just don't get the super cheap POS Chinese ones because those are just going to die on you really fast. Get something that's made by a proper filter company and isn't going to cost you like $400 for a stupid pump. Most of those pumps are super cheap if you look for the right ones. You get them for like $20 or whatever, and that's fine. I personally don't like that style of filter, but hey man, they're super effective. So it's just a matter of like, I know that I need to maintain them more often than I like to, which is why I don't like them. Who makes the best corner box filter? They're all the frickin' same. They're all the same nowadays. They're all made by the same companies in China. They're all the same. It's just about like getting the design you like the most, or that has the most room inside it for the way you want it. I have a favorite Tetra. Kochu. That's the only real Tetra I have anymore. Realistically, the Tetra I've been digging the most lately for the last like 2 years that I don't own, that I will eventually probably do, is Penguin Tetras. I just love the little like hockey stick black mark on their tail and lower body. They're a very simple Tetra, but I like them a lot. You know what Tetra I can't stand? Neons. Don't like them. And the reason why I don't like them is because I have so much bad experience with them. They're so fragile a fish. You know what looks really cool, though? Those veil-tail neons. Those things look insane in person. Like, a camera cannot capture those things right. But me personally, if I'm going to spend $14+ a fish, I'm going to buy rainbows. Just my jam, man. I just played at my jam. Do. All right, let me make sure I'm catching up on chat correctly here. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Keith Hines, I'm going to be setting up a 180. Had an idea of using 6 sponge filters along the back with a fair amount of plants. Will it work? Yes. Very similar to that 75-gallon question. It's just about having enough flow to break up your surface, right? Definitely make sure you have actual air stones inside those sponges to get a finer bubble pattern. That's going to help you a ton. Those Ziss no clog air stones that Co-op carries are freaking fantastic for doing that. I love those things to death. I'm sure Candy will put a link somewhere in chat for them. And similar designed air stones like that basically are no clog, where you don't really have to pay attention to them. Great. And then just make sure that you have based on the fish you're going to keep, the type of sponge you want. So either more coarse, less coarse. I wouldn't go like super fine. Like, don't do 60 ppm or anything, or 60 ppi. Do like 30 ppi if you want to do something slightly finer. If you want to go really coarse, like 20 ppi, which I think is what the Co-op sponge is, you can do those. I personally like 30 ppi. I like a little less particulates in my water, but that's just because I'm prissy about my water at times. And when I'm trying to film, I don't like seeing particulates in the water, and that's really what it comes down to. I have a tank that I don't film very often because the fish cause lots of particulates in the water, and it drives me nuts. It's such a prissy way to look at it, but yeah. Cesar, thanks for the super chat, man. All right. Good way to stabilize or buffer pH between water changes. So the easiest way to buffer your pH is to have some kind of buffering compound. One of the most common things is using baking soda in small amounts, just because as you're doing a water change, as long as you know the formula a little bit and you're done, you can do things like crushed coral in your tank or oyster shell or similar. That's going to help slowly add that hardness to your water and stabilize your pH, but your incoming water will be different. Most fish can handle that because they'll come from places that rain, and when it rains, you're getting a deluge of water that is usually softer than the water that's actually in the system, unless you're really in a really acidic system. So it's all about, if you need to keep your pH closer to 7 or over 7, two options. The really lazy option is to do like crushed coral. But if you want the most efficient option, it would be using something like sodium bicarbonate, aka baking soda, and just adding the proper amount for each water change as the water is coming in, and it'll buffer for you within minutes, right? It's very fast. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much for the super chat. Not necessary, but I appreciate it. Also, next week, definitely be here, guys, because that's the week of Christmas. I'm going to give some stuff away. I was going to put that out there. We're almost at the end. I'm going to give some stuff away next week. Like, I don't know, probably like 4 gift cards between 20 and 50 bucks. Maybe they'll all be 50. I haven't really decided. I'm in that spirit of giving because I can't go see my family. So be here next week. Be here next week. Promise. Stuff will be given away. Might be to the Co-op, might be to Amazon. Haven't figured that part out. But it's coming out of my pocket. Sponsored by me. And my job. Eric, thanks for the advice. Pouring filter gravy now. Yeah. I love that term. Stealing it forever. I think filter gravy is the greatest term ever. Jeff Chambers, I feel like any 220 should just have a sump. I mean, yeah, I think it's the most efficient. But hey, people do what they want to do. Whoa, chat jumped. So many questions. What'll I do? Probably answer them, right? Justin, what do you think about aquaponic systems using plecos as the fish, breeding them and using their poop at the same time? Okay, so here's the thing. Plecos are crazy messy. They eat a ton and poop a ton. So in general, you probably will still have to go in and clean out some amount of that mulm layer, like even especially bristlenose, because like they eat and 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 eat, right? But they're gonna feed the heck out of those plants. So if you're trying to grow like edible greens, for example, yeah, they're gonna have all the food they've ever need. You just gotta make sure that you have a plant load that can handle that, right? That's really all it comes down to. Monica Lynn. Just got your live stream notification, listening while working. How's your dog? My dogs are all good. All of them are. They're very happy, although one has been a little whiny today because she's in her crate while I live stream so that she doesn't mess with what lights my ugly mug here. They're good. Papolimo actually is, because I assume it's Papolimo. He's the one that is the best at being on camera because he'll actually let me hold him really well. He's actually downstairs. That's his like kind of permanent home right now, and he gets the most spoiling and attention down there too. So he's like complete opposite room. Otherwise, I would let him on. I'm gonna try and like, I think for next week I'm gonna try and have one of the dogs with me. I'll see how I can logistic that out without a dog going crazy on me. Make sure you're here next week, Monica. Do it. All right. Let's see here. I know I got some more. The Floater King. How come Platies and Mollys get no love in the planted tank community? So I think part of that is because just they're not as popular right now as they were at another time. I actually like Platies quite a lot. I used to have a big group of Mickey Mouse planties in my... did I say planties? God, I can't speak English, man. Why do you guys listen to me? In my 20 long that's over that way, right? I used to have a bunch of Mickey Mouse platies in that thing. And it really all it came down to is I had them for like 2 years. And I was finally like, hey, I kind of want to do something different in this tank. So I sold them all to the Aquarium Co-op. I had blue-bodied with a orange hyphen. Absolutely beautiful little fish. I think the one platy that I like right now a lot is not the teacup platy, which a lot of people are digging on. I love those bumblebee platies, that yellow and black. Looks really nice. I might do something like that in the future, but really what I want to do, if I'm going to be dead honest with you, I want the Yucatan sailfin molly, the one that Greg Sage used to sell but currently does not, because he's been having some issues with his birth rates. And he's got other breeders that he's got his resources that are selling them, but that big the Volifera molly is its official name, right? Whoa. I love that just giant like cockatoo mohawk thing that the males have going on, and the fact that they're like a 5-inch molly. I mean, I go like this because they're huge, but I mean for a molly they're massive. I really want those stupid things, but I have to have a giant tank for them, so I have to wait until I have a giant tank available in my garage, and then I'm getting some. No doubt. I like mollies and platies from the perspective of what they can do to help your tank, because they're actually really good algae eaters. Hair algae, blackbeard algae, they'll eat it all. If you just stop feeding them, they'll eat it. It's great. So in your planet tank, if you have an algae outbreak, you just stop feeding the fish, and they eat all the algae after a couple days, and then you can go back to feeding them, and your algae's gone. It's fantastic. But I think the trend in aquariums right now is more nano small fish, right? And that just takes you away from that bigger body that the platy and the molly have. It takes you more toward guppies. You also have a lot more color variance in guppies. You have a lot less people actively trying to breed crazy types of mollies and platies. But there are some really cool ones out there with some really dedicated, cool breeders. So if you can get the right ones, they're awesome. And a lot of people, I think they're underappreciated. I would definitely agree with, like, they don't get enough love. They're great fish. Brandon, you think I can't read your backwards name? Cheater. What is a good rainbow to start with? I would say that praycocks are probably the easiest to both acquire and get used to rainbows. They're the most obvious male versus female because the males have red fins, the females have yellow fins, but they all get that beautiful blue body. The difference is the boys will get bigger in body and they'll get like taller. They're not as big a fish, so you can fit them into smaller tanks to kind of get used to just taking care of rainbows, watching their behavior, learning how they work. And they will colony spawn. They're pretty good about like all laying eggs in a mop and not picking them too much. So if you want to like learn how to breed them off of prey cocks, they're a really good fish to learn how to breed from as well. That would be my suggestion. If you want a slightly bigger fish, just do the bozemanai. The bozemanai are simple. They're easy to find kind of everywhere. They're a great fish. They're hardy. They're beautiful. They're my favorite. You know, don't be afraid. The other thing is if you want if you don't want to go quite as warm, or maybe you want something a little easier, like you want to take your tank only like 72 degrees, look at turquoise rainbows. Turquoise are the other one that I think all males and females get that beautiful blue color. They look great. The only difference is like you just have to learn how to judge by their fins and body shape what's male and female if you care. But other than that, they all get beautiful colors. They get big. They get wonderful. And they have just that beautiful, beautiful, like azure blue color to them. So nice. So nice. Jeff, get one of those old school DE hang on the side and run it before you shoot video. I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. I'm sure I would. I'm just like brain dead at the moment. It's been a long day at work. We're doing a lot of crazy stuff at work right now until the next year, so I've been super busy. Super, super busy. Today was the one day I got to leave early. I'm going to be working probably... I have 3 days left in my work week. I am probably going to work at least 12 hours a day for those next 3 days. We are very busy at work. Very busy. Or at least by we, I mean we leads are super busy. And I'm a team lead who's about to have a team grow, so I have to get ready for that. Have to design all sorts of training documents and stuff to amp up our training to make it faster, because there'll be more people than I can hands-on train. Yay. Jediah, don't tell people you're giving stuff away. Let the ones who show up get lucky. I have noticed that most of the people who show up to my streams are about the same crowd for the most part, and there's only a small difference of people who are just showing up. Like, there's somebody who won one of the Aquarium co-op hats that I gave away, 3 weeks ago now? 4 weeks ago? It was right before Thanksgiving. And it had been their first time being in the stream. And, I don't think there's a problem with that, right? I think, how do I put this? I think it's perfectly okay just to, like, reward people who are there. And if you're here already in the stream and enjoying the stream and you show up again because there's a chance you're going to win a gift card, like, cool on you. You showed up to 2 streams. That's pretty great. You hung out twice. I appreciate that. I think it's fine. It's not killing anybody. It's not like somebody who, like, is going to show up for just 5 minutes and like, I heard on the internet there's a giveaway. When is it? Oh, it's next week. I'll know exactly the time to show up for the giveaway. Like, it'll be at random times. You know me, I barely can keep structured as is. Oh, man. Jeff Chambers, I vote for Aquahuna or Aquatic Arts gift cards or Wet Spot. That's not actually a bad idea. Aquahuna might be nice. So I would stray away from Aquatic Arts, if only because I know their shipping is kind of expensive, and like, you don't want to be like, I'm going to get $50 in fish, and then find out you have to pay like $80 to ship them. It's like, womp, womp, womp. But, maybe I'll do like get gills or something. Who knows? I'll figure something out. Maybe I'll just do a bunch of different ones. But I also kind of want to make it available to people who aren't in the U.S. too. Brian K., you were a member before, weren't you? Could have swore. Anyway, welcome to Auto Synkless. Oh, maybe not. You've got the new icon. You're a newbie. What's up, buddy? One of my fellow rainbow nerds. Getting close to time for Dr. Black's stream, so I'll try to answer like 1 or 2 more questions real fast, and then we'll zip out of here. So thank you so much, folks, for who have been here thus far. Fish and shrimp by Rich. I am not here, but I never win. Oh man, that's not bad. Jeff Chambers, Did they have a diatomaceous earth filter that you could hang? Oh, diatomaceous earth. Okay, that's what you mean by DE. I mean, yeah. Uh, those things are usually expensive. My experience back when they were trying to push DE filters. Now that I know what you're talking about, and my brain like finally is functioning again, it's not very functional very often. It's a wonder that I'm in the in the industry I am. They were always super expensive, so I just like stray away from them immediately because I've got like some kind of sticker shock from the past. Oh, Lynn Arneson, what rainbows will get along with guppies and platies? So most guppies and platies do okay with pretty much any rainbow. The problem is the fry can be so small that some of the rainbows can predate on them. So in general, what you want to look for are the dwarf rainbows. Realistically, what I would look for is Radnocentris. So rads are a really small kind of torpedo-shaped rainbow. They only get about yay big. They stay very, very small. They eat very similar food, but because they don't get very big, they're less likely to predate on the fry. So that would be a rainbow I would look into. Some really good ones are the Ceres Creek, Radnocentris ornatus, or Tiwa Creek. Those would be my two suggestions, if you can find them. Easiest way to find them is going to be like Aquabid, but there's people who keep them locally in certain parts of the country too. So good options. Good options. Kevin, do you have any Australian rainbow fish? Yes, I have a group of wild-caught Australian rainbow fish. And like your generic $2.99 Australian rainbows, they're mixed. You never know exactly what species they are, but they can be really pretty. And if you just want some cheap rainbows to put in a tank, they're a great option. You're going to wait a little bit for them to color up, but once they do, they look great. Okay. One. I'll find like one. Craig making fun of how I say master breeder. It's because I speak too fast is really what it comes down to. And I only enunciate so well. You would think I used to be, like a professional in industry where speaking mattered. But that's because I spoke way slower and my natural speaking pace is a lot faster than like radio. Where radio, it's this slow and timber, it's just got to work at it. I like to speak fast, mostly because I talk too freaking much and I don't get to all the questions I want to. Last question of the night. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the first name there, but Jean-Francois. I can do that part. How do you filter, clear up milky water? So depending on, most of the time when your water's kind of milky or silty, it's particulates that are up in the water. So really what you need is something that's going to turn over the water at a reasonable rate and get some kind of temporary fine filter pad in there. You could use filter floss. You could get like the kind of rolls of filter pad that are out there on Amazon, or just a good piece of sponge that you put into whatever kind of powered filter you're using. You just need something that turns over the water at a relatively good speed. So this usually requires a hang-on back or some kind of small canister. You can also do, if you get a Powerhead, right? This is a trick somebody's talking about. You can insert pop bottles into the opening, or tape them in place, and then fill that with filter floss. It's a really good way to clean up a ton of particulates really quickly, and that can be moved tank to tank if you have to. Just make sure that if you're going to move it tank to tank, give it a quick sterilization with like some hydrogen peroxide. It's just going to clean it up, make sure that just in case there's nothing transitioning from tank to tank. Okay? That's probably the best way. It's really just getting a finer particulate filtration and cleaning those particles out of the water. Now, otherwise, what you're dealing with, if it's kind of milky and that doesn't work, is you're dealing with a bacteria bloom, and that is going to go away over time. It's just that you've all of a sudden produced a ton of food, and your bacteria culture has this massive bloom, if you will, and it gets so good it hits the water column. But that goes away typically after a week or two. If it doesn't, it usually means that something's having trouble colonizing in your actual filter media with your bacteria colony, so that bacteria is expanding throughout the water because there's so much excess there for them to grab. More water changes typically helps. I would do like 30% every 3 days is also going to be another way to help deal with that problem over the process of a couple of weeks. Hope that helps you. Okay, guys, that's going to be it. Again, tune in next week. Yes, I'm going to give stuff away. I don't care. I'm in a good mood. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Brian and Cesar for the membership and super chat, respectively. And stay awesome. Be here next week. Don't miss it. Don't miss it.